What if your everyday 9 to 5 turned into a one-way ticket to disaster? How do ordinary workplaces morph into scenes straight out of a horror movie? Step into the chilling tales of the most jaw-dropping workplace tragedies of all time, as we unravel the shocking dangers hidden in plain sight. Could these accidents have been avoided? In the early hours of October 11th, 2012, when most people were still wrapped up in their blankets, dreaming of coffee and bagels, the Bumble Bee Foods plant in Santa Fe Springs was already buzzing, pun intended, with activity. This wasn't your average 9 to 5 joint. It was a well-oiled machine where industrial ovens churned out enough canned tuna to feed armies of sandwich lovers. Among the dedicated crew was 62-year-old Jose Melina, a seasoned employee who knew his way around the plant better than most people know their own kitchens. Jose was one of those reliable guys, the kind who showed up early, rolled up his sleeves, and got the job done. That morning, he was tasked with a routine maintenance check on one of the plant's industrial ovens. Now, calling this thing an oven is like calling the Grand Canyon a ditch. This beast could cook tons of tuna at once, operating at a toasty 270 degrees Fahrenheit. For Jose, though, it was just another day at the office. Armed with his tools and years of experience, he climbed into the belly of the machine and got to work. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the plant, a co-worker was loading up the next batch of tuna. Picture this: 12,000 pounds of fishy goodness, all ready to be cooked to perfection. Unfortunately, in the hustle and bustle of the morning, the co-worker assumed Jose was off grabbing a cup of coffee or chatting in the break room. Without a second thought, they shut the oven door, locked it tight, and hit the start button. Inside the oven, Jose quickly realized something was terribly wrong. As the temperature began to rise, he tried to shout for help, but the plant's machinery was louder than a rock concert. Imagine the panic. The kind of nightmare scenario you wouldn't wish on your worst enemy. 2 excruciating hours passed before anyone realized Jose was missing. By the time the oven cycle was complete, the unthinkable had happened. When the oven door finally swung open, the horrifying truth left everyone in shock. Jose was gone, and the plant was plunged into chaos. News of the tragedy spread quickly, leaving employees, friends, and family grappling with the loss. But the story doesn't end there. What followed was a legal and ethical reckoning that shook Bumble Bee Foods to its core. Investigators discovered glaring safety lapses. Basic protocols that could have prevented the tragedy had been ignored. The company's industrial ovens lacked simple safety features, like a lockout mechanism to ensure no one was inside before operation. Bumble Bee Foods faced a $6 million settlement, the largest in its industry's history. The plant's operations director and safety manager didn't escape unscathed either. They were hit with fines, community service, and criminal charges. As for Bumble Bee, the company scrambled to save face, pledging to overhaul its safety practices. They upgraded their ovens, implemented stricter protocols, and launched training programs to ensure such a disaster would never happen again. But let's be real, no amount of money or corporate reform could undo the heartbreak Jose's family endured. For them, this wasn't about settlements or safety upgrades. They had lost a husband, a father, and a friend, and no legal resolution could fill the void he left behind. The tragedy at Bumble Bee Foods became a sobering reminder of the high stakes of workplace safety. It wasn't just about following rules, it was about protecting lives. For workers across the country, Jose's story served as a wake-up call, a haunting example of what can go wrong when corners are cut and assumptions are made. In the end, Jose's legacy is a bittersweet one. His story sparked change, forcing companies to take a hard look at their safety standards. But it also left an indelible mark on everyone who heard it, a reminder that behind every job title is a human being with a family, a life, and dreams that deserve to be protected. In the bustling Ventra Ionia Auto Parts factory in Michigan, the air hummed with the rhythmic clang of assembly lines and the whirring choreography of robots. It was a symphony of steel and sparks, a place where machines outnumbered humans. And yet, in this mechanical metropolis, Wanda Holbrook was a standout star. At 57, this maintenance technician from Grand Rapids was a rare presence in the male-dominated world of robot wrangling. She wasn't just fixing machines, she was taming them, turning tantrum-throwing robots into obedient workers with her almost magical touch. Wanda had spent 12 years navigating the complex labyrinth of industrial automation. Her peers admired her not just for her unparalleled expertise, but for her calm, unshakable demeanor. She was the go-to person when things went south, a sort of robot whisperer who could troubleshoot a problem faster than most people could find the on-off switch. In a world dominated by metal giants and relentless schedules, Wanda was the human glue holding everything together. But on July 7, 2015, the unthinkable happened. It started like any other day at the factory. Wanda arrived early, ready to conquer the challenges of the 100-cell area, a vast 800-square-foot arena where robots performed a carefully choreographed routine of bumper welding. It was like watching an industrial ballet, where every move was precise, controlled, and predictable. Except, on this day, it wasn't. A robot in Section 130 decided to go rogue. For reasons still unclear, its arm swung wildly, breaching the invisible boundary into Section 140, Wanda's workspace. In a split second, the machine's erratic arm struck her with brutal force, crushing her between its mechanical limb and a hitch assembly. The once harmonious dance of the factory turned into chaos. By the time her co-workers noticed something was wrong, operations had come to a screeching halt. Wanda, the factory's dependable cornerstone, was gone. The news spread through the factory like wildfire, leaving everyone reeling. Wanda wasn't just a colleague, she was a mentor, a friend, and a rock for so many. Her family husband, Bill, their children and grandchildren were devastated, and the community mourned the loss of a woman who had dedicated her life to keeping things running smoothly. The factory, once a hub of efficiency and routine, now felt like a haunted shell of its former self. But this story didn't end with sorrow. Bill, grieving but determined, refused to let Wanda's death become just another statistic in the world of industrial accidents. He wanted answers and accountability. Taking his fight to the courts, he filed a lawsuit that turned heads across the industry. His claim? The robot that killed Wanda should never have been able to enter her workspace. It was a catastrophic failure of the factory's safety systems, and Bill was ready to name names. The lawsuit pointed fingers at several companies responsible for the plant's automation big players like Protomax, Flex & Gate, and Lincoln Electric. Bill accused them of negligence, arguing that those who designed, built, and maintained the robots had failed to ensure their safe operation. The rogue robot from Section 130, he argued, had no business wandering into Section 140 or trying to load a hitch assembly in a place it didn't belong. This wasn't just bad luck, it was a systemic failure that needed to be addressed. Wanda's death was one of the first robot-related fatalities reported in the U.S., making the case a grim milestone in industrial history. It served as a wake-up call for an industry that often prioritizes efficiency over safety. The incident underscored the critical need for robust safety measures, rigorous testing, and constant vigilance in environments where humans and machines share space. In the end, Wanda's legacy wasn't just about the machines she fixed or the factory she helped run. It was about the lives she touched and the lessons her tragic death taught the world. She reminded us all that, no matter how advanced our machines become, the human element, the care, the caution, the connection must never be overlooked. On May 30th, 2015, the sun greeted Kailua Kona, Hawaii, with a golden glow that promised another picturesque day by the Hanoka House small boat harbor. Among the early risers was Captain Randy Lanes, a legendary figure in the sport fishing world. With over 25 years of experience, a sharp eye for the sea, and an aloha spirit that made him the harbor's favorite storyteller, Randy was the kind of guy who turned ordinary mornings into memorable adventures. But this wasn't going to be an ordinary morning. A sudden commotion rippled through the harbor, something big was in the water. A broad-bill swordfish, between 4 and 6 feet long with a 3-foot bill, had made a surprise visit to the calm harbor waters. Swordfish, often called gladiators of the sea, were more at home in the open ocean than a quiet harbor. The sight of this formidable creature caused a buzz, and Randy saw it as more than just a spectacle. It was an opportunity. Swordfish meat was prized for its taste and value, and landing one in such an unexpected spot could be a career highlight. Wasting no time, Randy grabbed his spear, dove into the water, and set his sights on the fish. One of his crew members, equally amazed by the spectacle, began filming what would tragically become Randy's final act. The swordfish, living up to its gladiator nickname, wasn't about to go down without a fight. The spear hit its mark, but things quickly spiraled out of control. The fish became entangled in a mooring rope, turning the harbor into a chaotic whirlpool of thrashing water and raw power. Like a scene out of a seafaring thriller, the swordfish reversed its charge, its sharp bill becoming a lethal weapon. In one devastating move, it struck Randy in the chest with enough force to pierce muscle and bone. His crew, horrified, pulled him from the water and worked frantically to save him, performing CPR until paramedics arrived. Despite their efforts, Randy was pronounced dead at the hospital. The news spread quickly, and the tight-knit sport fishing community of Kailua Kona was left stunned. Swordfish fatalities were virtually unheard of, making the freak accident all the more incomprehensible. Randy wasn't just any fisherman, he was a husband, father, and friend who left an indelible mark on everyone who knew him. His wife Rachel, 21-year-old daughter Kia, and 8-year-old son Austin were devastated, grappling with the unimaginable loss. Beyond his family, Randy's generosity and larger-than-life personality had touched countless lives. His cousin, Bomboy Lanes, shared stories of Randy's kindness, how he would invite strangers to barbecues, offering food, laughter, and a warm welcome, even when he could barely take a day off himself. As the community came together to mourn, they celebrated Randy's bravery, dedication to his craft, and his ever-present aloha spirit. Fishermen who had shared the highs and lows of life at sea with him gathered to honor his memory, recounting tales of his skill, courage, and infectious laughter. Whether the swordfish's fatal strike was an act of intent or a panicked reaction, the result was the same: a great man was gone too soon. Randy Lanes, the harbor's beloved captain, left behind a legacy of love, adventure, and a reminder that even in the face of the sea's unpredictable dangers, his spirit would forever remain as vast and enduring as the ocean itself. Zachary Freeman Muse was a 25-year-old firefighter from Waterford, Ontario, whose life was all about chasing flames and making a difference. Employed by Summerland-based Big Cat Wildfire, Zachary worked for a private company partnered with the British Columbia Wildfire Service. Though it was only his first season on the job, his passion and dedication were as clear as a roaring fire in the night. On July 28, 2023, Zachary found himself facing one of his toughest challenges yet: a fierce wildfire at Donnie Creek, a remote area north of Fort St. John. The terrain was rugged, the fire was wild, and the stakes were sky-high. But Zachary wasn't one to back down. Alongside his fellow firefighters, he worked relentlessly to tame the flames, showing the kind of courage and grit that had already earned him the respect of his team. Then came the tragedy. While navigating the hazardous landscape on a utility task vehicle, UTV, disaster struck. The UTV lost control on a gravel road and plunged down a steep drop. The accident was as sudden as it was devastating. Despite the quick response of his colleagues, the severity of Zachary's injuries was undeniable. He was airlifted to the Fort St. John Airport in a desperate bid to save his life. But despite the heroic efforts of the medical team, Zachary succumbed to his injuries en route. The news of Zachary's death hit like a gut punch, sending shockwaves through the firefighting community and beyond. His passing was a sobering reminder of the dangers faced by wildfire crews who put their lives on the line every day in some of the most treacherous conditions imaginable. British Columbia Health Minister Adrian Dix called the incident an enormous tragedy, a sentiment that echoed across the province as people grappled with the loss of a young hero. An investigation was quickly launched by the RCMP, the BC Coroner Service, WorkSafe BC, and the BC Wildfire Service to understand what went wrong and prevent future tragedies. Meanwhile, Zachary's family and friends were left to navigate the heartbreak of losing someone who had so much more to give. At Zachary's funeral, the community came out in full force to honor him. Hundreds gathered, including his family, friends, and firefighting brothers and sisters. It was a deeply emotional ceremony, filled with tearful tributes and stories that painted a picture of a man whose kindness, bravery, and unwavering commitment had touched countless lives. One of the most poignant moments came when Zachary's uncle, Paul Cranch, a retired 40-year-old, spoke on behalf of the family. He shared stories about Zachary's close bond with his father and the pride his dad felt knowing his son had lived out his dream. Though the grief was overwhelming, there was comfort in knowing Zachary had pursued his passion with his whole heart. In the wake of the tragedy, Zachary's family issued a heartfelt statement, expressing their devastation and gratitude for the outpouring of love and support. Determined to honor his memory, they launched an online fundraiser for the Canadian Critical Incident Stress Foundation's Camp Faces program, which supports families coping with loss. It was a fitting tribute to a young man who had dedicated his life to helping others and embodied compassion and generosity. On June 2, 2022, a heartbreaking incident unfolded at the Caterpillar Foundry in Mapleton, Illinois. Stephen Dierck, a 39-year-old father of 3, tragically lost his life just 9 days into his new job. What started as an ordinary day at work turned into a nightmare no one could have predicted. Stephen was a devoted family man from Peoria, Illinois. He deeply loved his partner, Jessica Sutter, and their 3 young daughters, aged 4, 5, and 12. Known for his hardworking spirit and gentle nature, Stephen had recently started at the foundry, hoping to secure a brighter future for his family after a period of unemployment. But in a cruel twist of fate, his promising new opportunity became a tragic ending. The Caterpillar Foundry is no small operation. It's one of the largest in the United States, capable of melting up to 1,000 tons of iron daily. This industrial giant produces castings on a massive scale, but its intense, high-temperature processes also create a hazardous work environment. Employees operate in risky conditions, requiring extensive training to ensure their safety. Unfortunately, as Stephen would tragically discover, safety measures at the foundry were far from adequate. At around 9:20 a.m. on that fateful Thursday, Stephen was performing what seemed like a routine task, taking a sample of molten iron heated to a staggering 2,600 degrees Fahrenheit. The process required him to work dangerously close to a crucible, a large, open vessel used to melt metal. Without any protective barriers or guardrails in place, every step near the crucible was a gamble with life. Then, disaster struck. While working, Stephen lost his footing. With no safety measures to catch his fall, he plummeted into the crucible, where molten iron awaited. The intense heat consumed him instantly, melting part of his body while leaving only small bone fragments behind. The incident was so horrific that even experienced workers were left shaken and horrified. Emergency responders and the Peoria County Coroner's Office arrived on the scene shortly after, but there was nothing they could do. The facility was evacuated, and Stephen's remains were later recovered from the cooled contents of the crucible. The coroner's report chillingly labeled his death as a case of thermal annihilation. In the aftermath, OSHA, Occupational Safety and Health Administration, launched an investigation, concluding that Stephen's death could have been prevented with proper safety protocols. They fined Caterpillar $145,027, the maximum penalty allowed under federal law. While this might seem like a hefty amount, critics argued it was a mere slap on the wrist for a corporation of Caterpillar's size. Calls for a criminal investigation went unanswered, sparking outrage and accusations of favoritism toward powerful multinational corporations. Workers at the foundry voiced their frustrations, describing an environment plagued by poor safety standards and grueling conditions. Their concerns were not new. Just 6 months prior, another worker, Scott Adams, had died in a separate incident. Yet, despite these tragedies, Caterpillar insisted that safety was their top priority. Employees, however, felt their actions spoke louder than words, and the message wasn't reassuring. Jessica Sutter, Stephen's partner, was devastated. She publicly held Caterpillar accountable for his death, blaming their lack of safety precautions. Her grief was compounded by anger as she revealed that the company offered no support or assistance to her or her daughters in the wake of Stephen's passing. To Jessica, the tragedy wasn't just a senseless accident, it was a preventable loss caused by corporate negligence.